Hello there, glad you joined us. Welcome back to another edition of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers. We're here every week, as you know, meeting interesting people and dealing with topical issues, and we welcome in a couple of people who've been on the show before.
Yes, Drew Edmondson, the Honorable Reta Strubhar will be on talking about something called the Oklahoma Justice Commission. It's an organization, a commission, I think created by statute, but we'll find out, that is organized to try to do good things in the administration of justice and make sure that justice does prevail and tolerate injustice nowhere. Mm-hmm. And these two folks are deeply involved in that project and are doing big things.
And we will get to it when we return on The Verdict.
I grew up in a tough neighborhood. There was a lot of drugs and a lot of violence. Really, for me to get away was to focus on artwork. It was a way for me to really cleanse myself so I can deal with all the problems that was going on in school and at home. It kept me from crossing that line.
Our goal is to make sure that the arts are available to all, that our community is awakened by the arts, that our community is touched by the arts.
It's not an organization that's focused on one thing. They're focused on the arts across the board.
Chesapeake knows that in order to have a full and complete community, we have to have a strong arts component.
Now you have people that understand how important that is, and they're really getting involved. It really changes lives, and it changes families. You know, eventually it's going to change generations.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. And Kent's going to introduce today's guests.
Really pleased today to have two representatives of the Oklahoma Justice Commission join us. They're the two boss persons of the commission. They're going to tell us how it works and why we have it. To my left is a face that should be familiar to our viewers, the Honorable Drew Edmondson, a former Attorney General of the state of Oklahoma, and he's chairman of the Oklahoma Justice Commission. Drew grew up in Muskogee. Did his undergraduate work at Northeastern State University, did his law work at Tulsa University. He is a Vietnam vet. He is a former member of the Oklahoma House of Representatives, was a Muskogee DA before being elected as Attorney General, and he served as Attorney General for 16 years. He was a candidate also for governor in 2010. Drew, welcome back.
Thank you, great to be here.
Glad to have you. On my right is the Honorable Reta Strubhar. Judge Strubhar is co-chairman of the Justice Commission. She did her undergraduate work at UCO, did law work at the University of Oklahoma, is a former FBI agent, as is her husband, was an assistant AG, an assistant district attorney, and was in private practice before she was appointed to the bench at Canadian County as associate district judge. She subsequently was appointed to the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals and is the first woman to serve as a member of the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals and was the first presiding judge of that court. This is her third appearance on The Verdict. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Glad to have you.
Thank you.
Yes, welcome, Judge. Welcome, Drew. Drew, why do we need this? Why was the Oklahoma Justice Commission established?
Well, the Oklahoma Bar Association took note of the number of exonerations that had taken place around the country, hundreds of them on a national basis and a number of them here in the state of Oklahoma, including some that were on death row. And the bar thought it was important to look at what happened in those cases, why were innocent people who were subsequently exonerated, how could you convict an innocent person of a very serious offense. And so it, by resolution back in September of 2010, called for the creation of a commission to examine that question and, if possible, to suggest ways to avoid innocent people being convicted in the future.
So is this only for death row inmates?
No, no, although certainly the death row cases are the highest profile, but one of the cases we looked at was Jeffrey Todd Pierce, who served many years in prison for rape. Serious offenses, certainly, but not necessarily death row.
Judge Strubhar, how many members are you authorized? How many members do you have?
We have approximately 31 or 32, and almost all of them are there. We meet on a monthly basis for a 2-year commitment. And through the leadership of Drew, all of us are truly committed to what we're doing there. It's an interesting cross-section of people that are members of this commission.
Well, without referring to the individuals themselves, what kind of professions or avocations do these folks have that are members?
Well, you know, when you think of a commission like this that's going to look at people that might be imprisoned and that could be innocent, you think about the fact that they could be people that were only defense attorneys and public defenders, but they aren't. I mean, because of Drew's leadership, we were able to get many people there that were involved in law enforcement. There are judges on the commission. There are district attorneys on the commission. There are people on the commission that do victims advocacy. It's just a real cross-section of people in Oklahoma. We're real fortunate to have them.
And there's no top limit to how many you can have on the commission?
No, there's no limit. There were categories set out in the resolution that they really wanted to be on the commission, like the judges, the DAs, the defense attorneys. But the number of people on the commission was up to the chair. And I think we've got a pretty good working number. Not all of them are able to show up every month, of course. You know, there are judges on there that may be in the middle of a docket, and attorneys have obligations as well. But we've had very good turnout at the meetings, I think in part because I took a blood oath when we started that the meeting would be over at 4 o'clock. It starts at 2, it's over at 4, and we have not failed to meet that deadline at any of those meetings.
But we have some people that travel from very far distances also. I mean, we're not talking about just Oklahoma and Tulsa people. We're talking about people that come from the Panhandle and Muskogee and southeastern Oklahoma, right.
Who sets the agenda for the meeting?
Well, the broad agenda was set early on, and it was by the chair, but all of our agenda items are discussed. In each meeting, we talk about what we're hoping to talk about in the next meeting, and very open to suggestions and ideas. Very broadly, we were going to spend the bulk of the first year looking at cases, looking at wrongful convictions, most of them in the state of Oklahoma, but some outside the state of Oklahoma, going past the headlines to find out what happened in that investigation or that trial that led to what has since been determined to be a miscarriage of justice. And the second year, the year that we're in right now, taking what we learned from those cases and seeing what kind of recommendations to whomever, it could be the legislature, could be the Supreme Court, could be the Bar Association, could be DAs, chiefs of police, or sheriffs, what kind of recommendations can we make about changes in procedure and changes in law that will keep these kinds of cases from occurring in the future.
Are the members of the commission given a packet of background material prior to the meeting, or is all of the information presented to them once they arrive?
They are given, a lot of this is done online, particularly when we were studying the cases. The cases would be posted online. Anybody could access those, download them, and then at the meetings themselves, there are very often, you know, if somebody's working on a particular topic, they may have run across an article or a case that is particularly pertinent to that topic, and they will then distribute that to the other commission meetings.
And the uniqueness of this is that because of all of the people that we have on the commission and the people that are involved in it, many of them were involved in even the particular cases that we've talked about. I mean, so we're not only just reading what happened as reports or case history or whatever, but you really have people there that were involved in the case itself.
Now, you just look at cases that have already been determined at some point by some appropriate authority
Right.
to have involved a wrongful conviction.
Right?
You don't look at it and try to make the decision whether it should be turned around or not.
That's exactly right.
You get it after that decision's already made.
That's
So I
exactly
guess the way you integrate with the Innocence Project or similar organizations is that they do their work up to the time of a determination whether the conviction was wrongful or not. And then at that point, you have the option of picking up that case and looking at it if you choose to. Is that how those work?
And we really need to make the distinction between the work of the Justice Commission and the work of the Innocence Clinic. You know, on a broad brush, if you're in prison now, or if your family member's in prison now, and you believe they're innocent, you need to be talking to the folks at OCU at the Innocence Clinic. If someone has been exonerated, if there's been a court decision that someone was not guilty, that was not the perpetrator, then that's a case for us to look at to find out what went wrong.
Would you look at a case that you've selected where there's been a determination of wrongful conviction and say anything or try to make any determination about whether or not compensation ought to be paid to the wrongfully imprisoned person?
We haven't done that, and that's not our charge. We're not there to determine whether compensation is to be given or not. Certainly the law in Oklahoma allows compensation. But what we have done is we have approximately 10 cases in Oklahoma that we studied thoroughly. And we looked to see the areas that caused the problem. You know, why did we have something go wrong in those cases? And we looked at, and again, remembering it's not usually just one thing. You don't usually say, oh, that was because of eyewitness identification. It's usually a multitude, or not, maybe not a multitude, but it's usually several things. It could be eyewitness, it could be forensic science, and in fact, in Oklahoma, we had the unfortunate problem of many of these cases involving some problems with forensic science. But we did have eyewitness identification. We had false confessions. So there are several factors in each of the cases.
So I'm guessing that not all of these cases went to a jury trial.
I think maybe all of them did go to a jury trial.
I think all of the ones that we looked at went to jury trial. There may have been some, particularly in the false confession arena,
Yeah, that's what made me think
that may have
maybe
resulted in guilty pleas that have since been re-examined. But most of them are jury questions.
They did. Okay. But we did, though, see that there were still some false confessions. I mean, it was still stated to the jury, this person confessed.
Yeah, and so the idea is that perhaps the justice system broke down. Why?
Absolutely. That's exactly right. Why was there a false confession?
Let's take a break.
Thank
Drew
you.
Edmondson, Judge Reta Strubhar, our guest today on The Verdict. We'll be right back.
The thing that has made the most sense for me is realizing that I am still an educator, and that is what I do at the Chickasaw Nation. I'm Dr. Amanda Cobb-Greetham. I'm a historian, and I'm Chickasaw. The Chickasaw Cultural Center is amazing. It is a very, very special place devoted to the sharing and to the celebration of Chickasaw history and culture. State-of-the-art technology, exhibits that are not like anything I've ever seen. The Spirit Forest is incredible, and you feel as if you have actually just walked into a forest with huge trees all around you. It's timeless, and yet it's sort of also representative of our time depth, to really just sort of reach through time and touch the past. By the end of the exhibits, you really have a sense of Chickasaw cultural and political resurgence, and the extent to which we are a healthy, dynamic, and vital tribe today. Chickasaws have always been an inclusive people. This is something for the whole community and for the state of Oklahoma.
We believe in bulldogs, rams, and Spartans. But above all, we believe in students. Oklahoma's oil and natural gas industry is investing millions in education, equipping over 10,000 teachers with the nation's first energy-based curriculum. We're ensuring every Oklahoma student is equipped to lead America's energy future. Oklahoma's oil and natural gas industry, advancing our state, empowering our nation.
When you have something important to communicate, it becomes clear that there's a lot of competition for your audience's attention. So how can your message stand out and actually resonate with your audience? Legal Graphics has the answers. The team at Legal Graphics will work with you to plan, design, and even test your presentation to ensure your message will be heard and remembered. Call Legal Graphics today to schedule an appointment. The readiness is all.
Welcome back to The Verdict. We're learning more about the Justice Commission with Drew Edmondson and Judge Reta Strubhar. You mentioned earlier that the group gets together monthly.
Yes.
Is that often enough? Does it need to take place more frequently than that?
Because of the expertise of the people on the committee, I think it is. I mean, it's once a month. It's for a 2-year commitment, and we've made great strides. So it seems to me like it has worked. Now, we have gotten to the point now that we have subcommittees. And so if, in fact, those subcommittees feel as if they need to meet additional hours, there have been some that have been doing that. The subcommittee I happen to be working with that has to do with confessions, we have still continued to meet within that 2-hour constraint.
Right.
But if we ever felt like, well, since we're getting near to the end of our 2-year commitment that we needed to meet more often, we could.
Drew, it seems to me that somehow this is the result of the scientific advancement of DNA testing. That's part of the reason that we're starting to take a look at this. How has that changed prosecutions and the way the state looks at death penalty cases and serious cases?
Well, science has changed things in several of these arenas. There have been scientific studies on eyewitness identification, for instance. But certainly you're correct that the catalyst for this was what we learned with DNA, and we were able to go back in cases where all they had was blood typing, you know, the O and the defendant's O, and that's all you have. And also forensic testimony as to hairs, which we have come to learn was much more subjective than we thought it was. It was very much opinion, and opinions can be very much wrong. So we went from that to the ability to take a strand of hair, do mitochondrial DNA, and say categorically whether that hair belongs to that defendant. So that was a huge thing, and it resulted in a great number of exonerations. As we went into these cases, you know, Jeffrey Todd Pierce was he was exonerated by the DNA test, but I would bet that even weighing heavier on that jury was the fact that the victim pointed at him and said, "That's the man who raped me." And I know she must feel terrible now that she's learned scientifically that that is not correct, that he was not the perpetrator of that crime. But as Judge Strubhar said, in many of these cases we learned that it's a multitude, it's several things operating at once that creates a perfect storm leading to a wrongful conviction.
Let me follow up on one of the things you said. You said there's scientific advancement on eyewitness testimony. Can you expand on that?
Yes, there are now studies that, well, eyewitness identification is the most prevalent error in wrongful convictions, in exonerations. And eyewitnesses can be wrong. We have learned that eyewitness observation is particularly troublesome in cross-racial identifications. We have learned that errors in photo lineups and in physical lineups can lead to and enforce false identifications. In other words, if the detective giving the photo lineup suggests that the actual perpetrator is one of these 6 pictures, it is more likely that the victim will identify one of those 6 as the perpetrator. And then when that person is arrested and he or she sees that person at preliminary hearing, he or she recognizes that person as the person they picked out, and that enforces that prior incorrect identification. So now he or she has seen that person twice. And by the time it gets to trial, they're absolutely convinced that that's the person who committed the offense. So, you know, one of the things that we're not to our recommendations yet, but one of the things that that I believe fairly certain that we're going to recommend is new procedures in doing photo lineups and those kinds of pretrial identification procedures.
If your listeners have not read the book Picking Cotton, again, that was a book that was published 2 years ago. We all know it was Jennifer Thompson who was the victim, who picked a man by the name of Ronald Cotton as the person who raped her. He spent time in prison and subsequently was found not to be the perpetrator of the crime. And they together then have become friends, have written this book, Picking Cotton, and again it shows and explains a lot of the fallacies of eyewitness identification. I mean, she was certain that this was the person. I mean, she made a point of thinking about how can I identify this person later.
Judge, you served with distinction on the Court of Criminal Appeals. And
Thank you.
all that that court does, of course, is evaluate lower courts' decisions about whether or not convictions or the trial record supports the result.
Absolutely.
How has your work on the Court of Criminal Appeals assisted you in what you're doing now?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think we all realize that the one thing we never want to do is send a person to prison that is innocent. And it really, once you start working with the statistics that exist with eyewitness, once you start looking at those convictions in Oklahoma, then you have to step back and think about, you know, are we doing the right things? And one of the things that the commission also is going to be talking about is jury instructions that judges give to juries. I mean, judges are the gatekeepers, and what juries hear are those instructions that are given by judges.
So those aren't standardized, are those?
They are standardized, but the question is the jury instruction we're giving now, should that be changed? I mean, I, in fact, even brought like a couple of jury instructions that have to do with like jailhouse informants or eyewitness identification. And should we put into those instructions even more factors that jurors should know about? I mean, do jurors realize how often an eyewitness identification is incorrect?
Are juror instructions later open for grounds for appeal?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So it's very critical that it, you know, pass the muster there on more than one occasion.
Absolutely. In fact, we even, for a period of time, had some judges that were doing trial work that like refused to give the eyewitness identification instruction. That doesn't happen again because we've told them, if in fact eyewitness is determinative, then you must give this instruction. I mean, obviously if we're talking about a victim where a family member is involved, then that's not so critical. I mean, you and I both know and recognize those people, but if we're talking about a stranger, it is very critical.
We only got a few seconds left. Or anything you want to wrap this up in?
Yes, there is. There's something that I've been wanting to say. If someone is innocent and is convicted, that is a horrible thing. You know, they're deprived of their liberty for a period, sometimes a lengthy period of time. Sometimes they're put in jeopardy of their life. So that's a terrible thing in and of itself. But from a law enforcement standpoint, it's also terrible that means the real perpetrator is still out there. The person who did this crime has not been brought to justice, has not been tried, has not been sentenced, and that is equally important.
Glad you brought that up. Drew Edmondson, Judge Reta Strubhar, thank you both for coming on the show, and thanks for your work on the Justice Commission.
Thank you.
Kent and I'll have a final word when we get back.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
All children deserve a life of hope and love, but sometimes they experience a life of pain, neglect, and abuse.
When that happens, each child deserves all the quality assistance and representation that can be offered in our legal system. For more information, call 23-CHILD.
Oklahoma Lawyers for Children, helping to bring hope and love back to the lives of abused children.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
It started out with as a kinship foster home, and when things didn't go well with her mom, she came to be with us permanently. I kind of was her adopted mother anyway, just not legally until we got involved with DHS.
You will always be mom and dad to me.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information. And for almost 30 years, Oklahoma political, government, and business leaders have turned to the McCarville Report for accurate, reliable, inside information. Visit the McCarville Report online.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. It will be interesting to see the results of the commission when they present their report.
Yes, it's nice that we have such a blue ribbon panel of folks that are looking at things that have gone not right in our justice system, and we'll see what we can do about it.
And a credit to the bar for bringing this to, I think, everyone else's attention and suggesting they do this. And we will draw your attention to their website. It is okbar.org. That's okbar.org. We have one other website we'd love for you to look at when you have a chance, and that's ours. It's theverdict.tv. For Kent Myers, I'm Mick Cornett. We'll see you next week right here on another edition of The Verdict.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.